So maybe we could both introduce ourselves really quickly for anyone listening or watching. I'm Jeremy Kaplan. I write the Wonder Tools newsletter. I'm here at the CUNY Graduate School of Journalism in New York City, where I teach journalism. And Eric, tell us who you are.
Hi, everyone. I'm Eric Appus. I'm an editor of the New York Times. My job at the Times is I work in the newsroom, and essentially our journalists uh, learn new tools and new skills so that they can expand the different ways that they tell stories. And I'm also an author of a book out in September called Saying No to New, and its bookstores September 15th, but it's available for pre-order now.
Eric, I'm really excited about the cover of the book in particular. I want to show people um, what it looks like. Here's the cover image. Give us a quick summary of the book, what it's about, what the key takeaways are, maybe what might surprise people.
Yeah, so this is Saying No to New, and essentially this is a book about sort of the endless pull of novelty that we experience in the world today. Um, you know, there are new trends to follow, new products to buy, new gadgets, new kitchen gadgets, new apps for your phone and your computer. We live in an abundance of novelty, and many of those new things are very useful, right? Some of them are provide utility, some of them provide joy, but not all of them. And there's so much choice that we find ourselves in a place where we are uh, uh, oftentimes spending our money and our time and our attention on new thing after new thing after new thing. And actually, what I write about in saying it no to new is that our brains are wired to gravitate to the new things in the world, and we can end up in this place where we're just saying yes to new thing after new thing after new thing, and just burning through our resources. And so the book is all about how to reshape that relationship with novelty, how to look at something that's new that comes along, and really understand whether it's going to be something useful, whether it's going to be something that's going to bring you some kind of utility, joy, or happiness, or not, and to make better decisions about the new things you've come across in your life.
So this speaks to me so directly because I love new things. I'm like a kid in a candy store when it comes to technology and websites. I write about new websites. I get new gadgets. And my office is I'm surrounded by new stuff. So give me some examples if you could, and maybe others listening, can relate to my interest in gadgets and tools. Give me some examples of things where we probably don't need that new thing, or it's just net negative, right? It's
Right.
wasting more of our time or money than necessary. What are some examples that come to mind for you?
Yeah, and by the way, I also love new things. I mean, part of the reason I wrote this book was because I've always been an early adopter. I've always been someone who, I used to wait in line to get the new iPhone. In my job in journalism, I'm constantly tinkering with new stuff. Um, and through that work, have become sort of acutely aware of like, ooh, like this thing is not very very useful. So one of the things that is really important is whether or not you're thinking before you're adopting something new.
Mm.
It's one of the reasons why I love Wonder Tools, because it sort of causes you to like stop and think and really interrogate some new tool and figure out if it's going to be useful to you. Um, so a few clues as to whether or not you're looking at something and it's going to actually be worth it. One way to think about it is this new thing going to be something that's going to last me a long time? Is this something I'm going to be using over the long term? Oftentimes, with new products, material goods that we buy, we end up chucking them in the closet after a few days. I've got two kids, so this is constantly a thing in our home. Jeremy, I don't know if we're going to do now, but maybe later we're going to do some show and tell
Yeah.
to on some of this stuff. Um, so that's one thing, is really try to imagine, like, is this going to be, something that I'm going to use? Test it out, and really kind of get to know it, and whether or not that's going to do it. And so what I find is, there's a lot of material goods that don't really provide much utility or aren't really solving a problem. Um, uh, uh, Kitchen gadgets are a place where there's a lot of this. We have, sort of a graveyard of different kitchen gadgets that seemed really cool at the time, but like, actually, you know what? The old, knife was just like worked just fine for cutting things up. Um, a good one was there was like a salad mixer with a button on top that spun the salad around to dry off the water, which was cool again for a little bit, but then ended up in the back of a closet. And then as far as digital new things go, very similarly, if I pulled up my phone right now, I could probably find a whole bunch of apps that I've downloaded that maybe I paid money for. Certainly, I invested some time in, and they're just sort of like just sort of there in the back in like the graveyard of your phone. So that would be one of the biggest things I look for is like, is this going to actually provide long term value?
So I'm smiling because I actually started a blog at one point, very short lived, in the dustbin of my tech history, about kitchen gadgets. Exactly.
Oh, really? Yeah.
I love kitchen gadgets, from rice cookers and bread makers to ice cream machines and waffle makers. All those things, I love those. And living in a small New York City apartment, not the ideal place for experimenting with kitchen gadgets. So that was a short-lived project, but yeah, I could totally relate to that. And in the digital domain, I've written about this. I have more than 600 apps on my phone, right? Most of which are unused, right? It's not that I'm claiming to use all of those apps. Most of them are unused. And actually, one of the insights that I've gained over the years has been to avoid the wastage of time of going through manually getting rid of all of the stuff that I'm not using.
Hmm. Hmm.
In the physical domain, obviously, if you have a bunch of kitchen gadgets that are cluttering up your kitchen, you can't just leave them there.
Right.
But in the digital domain, if you have tons of old apps sitting on your phone, actually doesn't necessarily make that much difference. I mean, depending on your storage, et cetera, you may need to at some point clear things out. But in general, like taking the time to go back every single
Right.
day and find things you're not using actually wastes more time than just kind of focusing on what you actually do want to use and let those things lie.
Right.
In
Right.
the digital domain, the space actually isn't as much at a premium as it is in the
Right.
physical.
Right. Yeah.
In the physical domain. Yeah, let's go through some of our gadgets and
Should we do our show and tell?
yeah, let's do our show and tell, because we both have, I think, some stuff in our offices that maybe are less essential than other things. I'll start with the classic, VR
Oh,
headset.
yes.
So I've got a bunch of these now. This is the one that's maybe most comfortable. Um,
It does look very comfortable. It's got
where
the AT branding on there. Very cool.
yeah, for anyone who doesn't know or is not familiar with this, it's a VR headset where essentially you put in your phone inside. So you open this thing up, you put your phone in, you close it up, and then you are using a kind of VR view, um, so that you can see. I don't know. It's a more immersive view, essentially, of video, and the glasses have some lenses that allow you to kind of feel like you're immersed in. And I've got a bunch of variations on that theme, right? So this is a different set
Whoa.
that I picked up at one point. It's a little bit more portable. Same idea where you slot your phone into this little
Jeremy, I think
drive.
everyone on this probably wants you to put those on just for a second.
Oh gosh, this is such a ridiculous thing. I don't even remember how to use these, which shows you how little used it actually is. Um, but it looked cool at the time. It had a novelty effect. Here's one more pair, even smaller. Um, and again, same idea. You put your phone in there, and then you get a VR view. So anyway, the VR headsets, and I have to say, Eric, since you're from the Times, like the Times, I believe sent out 1 million, if I'm not mistaken, of
The
those
cardboard ones.
cardboard ones,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
When they were doing the Samsung project, for something new every day, which was exciting, right? But that's a case again where how many of those million are still in use? To your point, there was a novelty there, but in the long run, yeah, maybe we didn't need all those. Yeah,
Well, to make your point, Jeremy, VR, which is, you know, obviously for a long time seen as sort of this futuristic gadget. At the New York Times in our headquarters in Midtown Manhattan, we have a little museum of sort of the New York Times of the past, and that cardboard headset is in the museum. So it is an artifact of the past, of something that had this sort of fleeting sort of excitement and energy around it. But, today sort of, I think, sits on a lot of shelves or in the back of a lot of closets.
Yeah. What's one of yours?
Okay. So this is many people have seen these before. This is a coffee mug warmer.
Okay.
It's got a little USB cord. Okay. Plug this in, keep your coffee cup hot. And the concept is it makes a lot of sense, right? You want to keep your coffee warm, but it requires. This is a great example of something that a cup of coffee or a cup of tea or whatever your beverage of choice is, something that's been around for a very long time. There's this sort of analog experience of making the coffee and pouring it in, and the steam comes out, and um, uh, my personal preference is once you start introducing like a USB cord into that equation, it sort of starts to lose its magic. So this thing has sort of been sort of just laying around. You could see it's got kind of a crack on it. Uh, that's one thing. And then I'll show you these because I recently did a video about these. For any uh, parents out there, these are called Nitos.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
these are like stress ball,
Oh, right.
and they're squishy, and they're um these this is like all the craze right now is are these things. And people are selling them on eBay for hundreds of dollars.
Mhm.
um People are yeah, there you go, and that's sort of the old school version of this.
Old school
um
for one.
yeah. And look, they're fun, right? They're cool, but I can tell you from experience in my home, they'll buy them and they'll be like, I got the cake one. And then, it's down here in my office. It's it's probably never going to be looked at again.
So just to play devil's advocate here, it seems pretty harmless, right? These add
Yeah.
a little color to one's office. They're not too expensive. Maybe there's an environmental cost to producing all this stuff. That's not nothing. But what's the real harm? Someone might say, well, why do we need to say no to this stuff? Like, what's the damage or what's the problem?
It's a great question. And by the way, I always try to say this. My book is called Saying No to New. That title is really meant to stop you in your tracks because it's so counter to how our society presents products and information. New, we're told, we're sort of trained, and our brains work this way. New is meant to mean better. And so you go into a store, the new things are the better things. You go look at the new products. Um, or you go on your phone. If you want on your phone right now, you're going to find new information, and you'll go on social media, and there's influencers with new products. Um, and so, uh, and so the challenge there is if we go through life with that mindset that new is always better, um, we end up sometimes with fairly harmless stuff, right? Like, okay, this is maybe like $5 or $10. Um, but those smaller decisions about new things do add up.
Mhm.
And they add up in the form of spending money. They add up in the form of clutter. They add up in the form of you get something new that eats up a lot of your time and your attention. And so the trick is for some of these smaller new things is in the moment it seems very harmless and small. But the more of those decisions you make about new things, because there are hundreds of millions of products being sold, um, the more you're going to start to add those up, and you start to sort of lose control over the long term. Um, the other thing I always do try to say is that saying no to new doesn't mean saying no to new to all things. And in fact, in my book, I write about how if you can get really good at this and really understanding the new things that are going to bring you value, then you can start to see not only are you going to start to sort of push away the ones that aren't going to give you value, but you're going to start to really embrace the new things that are truly useful, because they kind of get lost in this sort of abundance of new things. And so, um, The idea is not to sort of beat yourself up over a $5 trinket that you get and say, "Oh, I've blown it. My life is over. I've got this squishy thing in my home." Um, but to just sort of be more intentional and bring thinking back into those decision making processes.
Yeah, I want to share a few thoughts that I got that you just sparked in me. One is remembering a friend, a former colleague, and a friend, Don Wilmot, who used to have a rule of thumb, which was if he brought something new into his apartment, he would take something out. Which I
Right.
think very, very,
Go on.
very clever rule of thumb. Obviously, it's easier said than done, but maintaining a minimalist kind of apartment, especially in New York City, some people like to adopt rules like that. Another thing that comes to mind is this book, Dopamine Nation. This
Mhm.
idea in there that struck me that we are often kind of seeking this novelty as a way of stimulating something in ourselves that is short lived, right? Essentially. And to your point, yes, like getting these little squishies for a few bucks may not be a big deal. But if we're seeking novelty and we get a new car and we get a new home, and, depending on the means or wealth we have, we get, these huge things. Some people buy mansions, they buy, second, third homes, they buy fancy cars or even planes or what have you, yachts. I don't know. And, those are the things that we could say, or at least some people might say, hey, maybe that kind of conspicuous consumption, that extravagant consumption in the long run at scale done by lots and lots of billionaires, right, is problematic, and even not by billionaires, right? Like those of us who have lesser means, and are spending on those things, that actually may have some damaging impacts. And it stems maybe to your point from the same place that gets us to get these little things, right? That's seeking that novelty seeking, right? Can be exhibited in lots of different levels of scale.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
and you touch on a really great point there, which is, and in saying no to new, I sort of walk readers through this that our brains are hardwired to gravitate to novelty, and part of this comes from evolution. Picture our ancestors a couple 100,000 years ago. Our ability to seek out new things is part of our survival. Finding new food, new berries, new patches, exploring new land to find new homes. All of these actions were beneficial to our species. And but for most of our existence, new things were scarce. Today they're abundant. But the same mechanisms are at play. And the way it works is that there's been lots of research that shows that when we see something new and novel, uh, we get sort of a spritz of dopamine. And the reason for that is going back to our sort of evolutionary roots. Um, New things oftentimes lead to rewards, and they have for most of our existence. But the other really fascinating thing that I learned in saying no to new is that actually novelty itself can be a reward. And what I mean by that is, okay, so you go out and you buy a new iPhone, let's say. Um, uh, Dopamine is sort of driving you to get that new product because it's really cool. It comes in new colors. It's got new features. It's shiny, and but the other thing that may be happening is actually just the idea of something new is the reward. There were studies done years and years ago where they would have these mazes where rats would run through them and they would have food. And so the rats, every time they'd run the rats through, they'd find the food. And so they got to the point where they know, okay, they know where the food is. And that was the reward for them. But then they would add a new leg to the maze. And so the rats could either go to the food where they know they've got something tasty or go sort of explore this unknown area.
mm,
And they would explore the unknown area.
mm,
There's a similar one where the rats would actually cross an electrified grid just to get something new and unknown, and so
mm,
they were actually willing to go through a little bit of pain to get something new. So we're hardwired to get new things, and this brings us back to your point, which is a really good one, which is one of the issues with sort of racking up a lot of these little new acquisitions as we go is that we believe that they're going to be really rewarding. Oftentimes, we think that a new product is going to make us happier and bring us joy. Um, but we get it, and we enjoy it maybe for a little bit, and then that sort of excitement wears off, and then the dopamine kicks back in, and we go, okay, we got to go, explore something else new. And what we end up doing is sort of chasing what we think is happiness in, a new coffee cup warmer or whatever it might be. But in fact, we're sort of diverting our attention and our money and our joy and other values away from the things potentially that we really do care about and really do want to spend our resources on.
Yeah, this reminds me also of the notion of the hedonic treadmill. My college advisor, Daniel Kahneman, used to talk about how we seek things out thinking they're going to change what we feel, right? And in fact, a lot of times we're just on that treadmill. We're going to return quickly. In the in the book I mentioned earlier, the Dopamine Nation, the authors talk about this as the seesaw, where we press down on one side and it kind of lifts, sets our pleasure sensors in motion, and then we kind of are going to naturally fall back quickly into equilibrium. There's a notion that Kahneman used to talk about too, also in this realm, which is the idea of comforts versus pleasures.
Hmm.
Comforts being things that we buy and then adapt to, like a nice couch or some other kind of physical thing that we kind of quickly just adapt to, are used to, and sort of fails to continue providing the same level of enjoyment as other things. And he contrasted that with the idea of pleasures. So pleasures are things that are transitory, and you experience them. Typically experiences like going to a concert, maybe an example, or traveling where you're there just for a short period of time, or getting some flowers, or having a special meal. Those are things that you experience and then they're gone. And they're therefore pleasures because they're not sort of long-term comforts. And his argument, I think based on some of the research in the psychology domain, was that those things actually are what enhance happiness, right, to a greater extent than the comforts to which we adapt.
Hmm.
What's your take on that? How does that fit into your framework?
Yeah, and by the way, I mentioned Daniel Kahneman a few times in the book and some of his work. That's something I touch on as well in Saying No to New, which is that um, I write a lot about the right type of new, and there are a few different things that sort of get us there. So one is, you mentioned experiences, you mentioned going on a trip, or going out to eat, or learning a new skill. All of those are new, right? Um, but research has shown that those type of new experiences can help with brain health. They do bring you lasting joy. One of the really interesting things I learned about new experiences is that there was actually a study done that I've mentioned in the book, about where they actually said, they surveyed people and they said, okay, um, uh, are you someone who appreciates sort of material goods or experiences? And actually had them sort of ruminate a little bit on the difference between those things. So one example might be, you go and you buy a bunch of kitchen stuff, a whole new pan set and so forth, or you go out and you take a cooking class, or you go out to a new restaurant. And what they found is that those experiences do bring more joy and happiness. And one of the interesting things about that is that there is an inherent social nature to that. So if you go and you buy something and you go home with it, or these days, right, it drops on your front steps, and you open the cardboard box from Amazon or whatever, and you got it, and you're like, I got the thing. That is sort of a product. It's a material good, and you sort of sit with it. With a new experience, you're out in the world, you're meeting new people, you're out with friends, you're out with family, you're with coworkers, or whatever it might be, and that social aspect makes those new things better. It actually like sort of helps them. It helps you like sort of enrich in your life, and people are sort of felt their well-being is improved by those. And one of the cool things about that is because the sort of social aspect of that sort of also lasts longer, right? You can talk about a trip with a friend. You could say, hey, I went on this trip. I went here. I visited this. You don't really talk about the products you buy. Sure, you do, but the difference is it's not like a beginning, middle, and end, right? I got the thing. It works. Whereas you go on a trip and you can actually tell a story about what you did. And so that sort of also helps boost that long term sort of fulfilling nature of a new experience versus a new product.
That's so interesting. It strikes me that a lot of the way we experience reality is through our internal thinking, right? And so, as you just described, when we have these experiences, we also set in motion a few kinds of internal thinking. One is introspection, right? We're thinking about ourselves and who we are, and that happens when that happens. Oftentimes, we're envisioning experiences and social experiences
Hmm.
rather than pots or pans or something physical,
Right.
right? Retrospection, right? When we're looking back at our past, we're often not thinking about, oh, those pans, oh, the couch, oh, this physical object that I purchased or acquired. We're thinking, oh, what about, that experience was so special, like remembering those moments, or
Right.
that interaction you had, or that laugh you had, or some other kind of emotional experience that you're reflecting back on and experiencing again and enjoying again.
Right. Right.
And then even looking forward, prospection, like looking ahead to something you're excited about. Right. Yes, you
Hmm.
may experience that with objects. I
Hmm.
can't wait till I get the new iPhone. I can't
Sure.
wait till I get the new huge TV or whatever it is that you're looking forward to. But probably, oh, that vacation is going to be amazing, right? That experience. I can't wait to see that person again. I can't wait to have that dinner, that special experience, right? That kind of prospection, looking forward to those things, probably tends to be. I'm just thinking out loud here. That probably tends to be more around the experience, that the novelty of that engagement with that person rather than that
Right.
object,
Right.
right? That kind of novelty that you were describing, which is interesting.
Right. And one trick I mentioned in saying no to new is you can combine the two. So so one argument I sometimes hear when I talk about the book is like, well, and you mentioned it earlier, like, what's the harm, right? So I write about in the book sort of the craze around something like a crumble cookie, right? Where people,
Mhm.
one time I was out in the city, and there's this long line outside of a cookie shop, um and on the one hand, um that's like my instant reaction is, are these cookies that good? Are you doing it because you really are want to enjoy the cookie? Are you doing it because of the sort of the hype around this thing and
Mhm.
you want to get the newest crumble cookie? Now, if you have a category of things like that, that like it actually isn't, you're actually not doing it for the enjoyment. You're doing it for the novelty. You're doing it for sort of the social cred, and it's not gonna give you joy, and you're just sort of racing from new thing to the next. Well, if you combine that with a social experience and you go with a friend, um, then you've changed the equation a little bit. You've made it more of an experience, and that's great. And you get to wait in line with a friend, you get to catch up with them, you get to laugh and take pictures of the photo. Suddenly, this sort of silly novelty thing that it changes from being something you're just fixated on getting because you feel like you have to get it to something that is memorable and is social and actually might bring you some lasting joy.
That's nice. Yeah, I like that idea. It's a way of transforming something from a negative to a positive.
Right,
Of
right,
saying no to new, saying new, NOUS to new,
right.
which is nice. Something you can do with others. Let's see what else we have in our offices. I don't know what else you have. I have a lot of novelty stuff. This is my Lumo band, which is, if anyone can guess what this thing is, you deserve a
Is it
prize.
some kind of workout thing?
It,
No.
that's a good guess. It actually affixes around your waist and it measures your posture. It has a sensor. So when you slouch, as I often do at my desk,
Oh,
it buzzes, right? So the
okay.
idea is that it's kind of a way to train yourself to
Oh, that's good.
to sit up straight, to stand up straight. Of course, as with many other objects in my office, it has been relegated to a drawer.
You wear it all the time, I'm sure, right?
Right, exactly. And this one, this one is one of the new generation of these AI recorders. This is a cloud device. People are familiar with that, and it's essentially a digital recorder, right?
Okay.
So it's a new version of an old object. This is one my brother used to use, which is an old digital recorder, right? Just like a tape,
Mm,
yeah, just an old fashioned tape, tape recorder.
yep.
And that has been around since I don't know, since the 80s,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah.
And this is
Classic.
this is brand new version of that old thing, and actually, not that much more useful, really,
Right.
I would say in the end.
and I'll show a couple things in a second, but you're touching on something really useful, which is you compared those two objects, and if you can you pull up the tape, the old
Sure.
school
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
So you can see there's buttons, right? And just on this little screen that people are looking at, you know exactly what to do with this, right? You've got the red record button, you got the play button, you got the stop, you got the back, you got the forward. And now if you pull up the AI version of it,
Yeah.
I'm sure there's instructions, and I know like once you set it up, it'll be automated. But one of the things that we find today is that new things are often designed with sort of a futuristic look to them. And it plays on the sort of novelty part of our brain that where we are drawn to things that we've never seen before, like that little AI thing that you have. Um, but oftentimes, and not always, a lot of products today obviously are designed beautifully and just work very well. But oftentimes, that futuristic design, that novelty look, that's meant to be like, "Ooh, this is different,"
Mhm.
which gets us maybe to spend some money and maybe to spend some time on it. Um, doesn't always work with human nature. And so you see this a lot with I write a lot in the book about um, uh, car dashboards is one of the best
Mm.
examples of this. Um, if you car dashboards are some of the most confusing um, parts, things that you'd have to deal with in sort of modern day technology. Uh, Finding the radio and where am I? Like, oh, I'm on the GPS, but I don't want to be on the GPS. I want to be over here. Whereas the old fashioned car dashboard was just, the radio, the air conditioning, the volume. Um, so that's an example of something when you're looking and deciding on a new thing. Look for some of those, is this going to work with the way that I use my fingers? Is it going to
Mm.
work with the way I use my eyes? Or does it look futuristic for the sake of looking futuristic? Another example of this is the bright lights that are oftentimes on fans and other sort of appliances
Mm.
it's really blue, so it's your eye is drawn to it, but then you're trying to nod off, go to sleep at night, and there's this blue light shining from across the room. So that's another way to sort of assess whether a new thing is going to work for you or not. Is if it's going to actually cause you to have to use a lot of effort to learn it and use it, or if it's actually going to work really nicely with the way that humans are meant to work, which is with their senses.
Another example of that would be this, sand timer I have
Oh yes,
on
yeah.
my desk, right? Very, very
You
clear,
know exactly what you're going to get from that,
clearly
right?
visible, right? Like, how efficiently am I working now? Can I get this done in a few minutes rather than wasting a lot of time on it? And in comparison with digital timers I've had, right? I have several in my office that have broken or that the battery has died or that the screen is too small or, I can't find it when I need it. Like, these are visible, easy to use, never need to be recharged. They look also nice,
Yeah,
like,
kind of mesmerizing. I'm sort of watching it fall through there.
we'll see how long I go on with this answer, or this comment. But yeah, they have a lot of attributes that are actually really nice, even
Yeah,
though they're very simple and very old and not at all new, right?
right, right. But you mentioned earlier this book, Jeremy.
Yeah.
Books are a great example of this. The eh, Despite the innovation in ebooks, paper books are still, I think, the sort of the way that 2/3 of Americans read books. Um, and part of that is you are using your senses, you're using your fingers to turn the pages. And then the other thing that is um, that sort of the thread that goes through something like a book or the sand timer or the tape recorder is it's isolated from the digital world. So if you're using your timer on your phone, um, you are also suddenly you're part of this ecosystem where
Mm.
you could get pinged and dinged and I got to check my email, I got to check social
Yep.
media, and so new things or not even new things, but products or uh, goods or services or apps that you use that are that allow you to actually focus on them in sort of a disconnected way, are also an example of sort of some of the differences between sort of a new thing that's going to sort of uh, that's just going to work versus one that's going to like a book never has to have a software upgrade, right?
Right, right. You maybe show people again the name of the book. The Dopamine Nation is the
Yes.
book we've been talking about by Anna Lemke. A great um, statement of how science reflects this idea that sometimes the seeking of novelty can be problematic. And part of what I think we've been talking about in a way is analog versus digital. That this idea and you describe it as tactile or physical touch aspects of it. There's a kind of resurgence of interest in records, right, in vinyl versus CDs and MP3s. Um, and I think in a lot of these realms, physical photographs, right? There's a
Hmm.
resurgence of interest in printable, what do they call it? Like Polaroid style
Right. Right.
photograph. You actually get a physical, tangible artifact of this picture you've just taken, of this moment, of this experience, as opposed to digital, which, even though it seems very attractive in the sense that you get unlimited number of pictures, right?
Right.
There's two problems with that at least. One is that actually an unlimited number of pictures, in a way, devalues the pictures that you actually have, right? Because then you have an unlimited number and they just feel less special
Right.
than they did when you kind of made a choice and took that picture and treasured that picture. Um,
The reason I'm looking down, Jeremy, is because I'm looking every once in a while. I'll do this to see. All right, how many photos do I have? Because I know it's a lot. And if I scroll, well, and see, here's a good example. I can't even seem to find it
this is
here.
on your phone, right?
It's in the tens of thousands. I'll tell
Yes.
you
Yeah.
that.
I passed 50,000. I know that because Apple used to have this thing where they were going to cut off one of your types of albums if it exceeded 50,000. So I was conscious of that.
I
Um,
think I'm around there. Which again, and I want to make this clear. I use my iPhone camera all the time, and I'm able to capture really amazing moments, and there's a real usefulness. Um, but I also do carry around little Polaroids of my kids in my wallet, and so um, the idea here isn't one is better than the other, and we have to sort of make that call. But you can once you start to think about some of the differences between these different types of products, whether it's analog and digital, or whether it's just a new thing versus another new thing, and whether or not it's going to be something that you should acquire.
One other example I have here in my office, this is a camera that my grandfather gave me. He taught me how to take pictures with
Oh
it
wow!
long time ago. This is an old Minolta, right? With the film goes in the back, and old fashioned batteries go in there, and you click the button to take the picture. You wind it, and there was something very satisfying about the physical, right?
Hmm.
Click and the
Yeah.
knowledge that the film is advancing, and the process of going through the stages, right? Of envisioning that picture, choosing that moment with your
Hmm.
eye, like using your own old fashioned, eye to decide, to see, right, as opposed to a digital view,
Right.
right?
Right.
Physically choosing that moment, making that decision, pressing the button, choosing the mode, obviously, more manually than you do now, let's say, capturing that moment, and then having that period of waiting, right? That
Right.
period of
Right.
uncertainty. Did that come out? And obviously, to your
Wait,
point,
what's this waiting thing that you're referring to? Is that something that exists? I've never heard of that. You have to wait for things?
yeah. So that was also like not just a positive. Like I don't want to sugarcoat. I'm certainly not someone who's gonna long for the days where we only had that
Yeah.
kind
Right.
of kind of photography. But there is something special about that period of uncertainty or that period of waiting and finding out whether it's going to come out, and then the excitement of actually getting that picture when it does turn out is really special. And I think we lose some of the lows. In other words, we don't miss the moment as much, but we also miss some of the highs of like, wow, remember that moment? I finally am seeing this picture like a couple weeks later, and or a couple of months or a couple of years later, right? And it feels so special because I don't have 500 of these moments, right? I have
Right.
3 or 5 of these, and isn't it special? And I can share this with a friend, and I can keep it and savor this tangible artifact that I
Right.
can physically touch and look at and be in presence with, unlike the digital pictures that are just going to sort of feel like they exist somewhere in the ether.
Yeah. You made me think of another way to sort of assess new things, Jeremy, that I write about in Saying No to New, which is um, the intrinsic value of things. And so you just talked about the camera that it was your
Yeah.
grandfather's. So that thing is not just a piece of technology that you can use to sort of complete a task. It has some meaning to you, and we can look at things today and make the most sort of this a similar assessment, and not just material goods. I know people who do like to get the latest iPhone because they really do love photography and they really find value in the improved cameras, which have gotten just extraordinary.
Yeah.
The improvements on them have been extraordinary. And so, and you can get the same, in Wonder Tools, Jeremy. You write about this all the time, and that uh, um, you find something really sort of, you do have sort of feel joy from something, or you have apps that you use that have made your life better, and you appreciate those, and so we can apply this kind of test to all kinds of different new things, which is like looking at it and really thinking about, this is something that I really enjoy. And the trick here is not to say, we don't want to slip into clutter, right? Where we're like, oh, I never want to get rid of this because it's I remember I used this 5 years ago. That's not what I'm talking about here, because that can be a very slippery slope. But it's in my mind, it's about replacing things, right? So I have a coffee maker that my wife has been pushing me to get rid of it and like upgrade it. But I like my coffee maker. It works for me. It does the trick. I wake up, it's program it. I wake up and the coffee's brewing. Um, so when you're in those moments where like, oh, should I upgrade it? Should I replace it? Um, Before thinking too much about the new thing, really look at the old thing and really think about whether it is something that needs to be replaced, or is it providing a service to you, or do you have some real memories tied to it?
I want to also play a little bit of a devil's advocate, although I think we probably agree on this to some extent about the things that are new that have great value to me that I wouldn't want to say no to. I just want to mention a few. Maybe you have a few also.
Please, yeah.
Share examples. One is Seek, which is this app, if people don't know, that allows you to identify plants or animals if you're out and about and you want to learn about nature, right? Merlin is another version.
I was going to mention Merlin. Yeah,
Yeah, Merlin is for birds, right? You can basically record the audio of a bird, or
it's an incredible app if you've never used it.
completely free. Both of these are completely free, Seek and Merlin. Seek allows you to take a little picture or basically point your phone at anything in nature, almost anything, and it will tell you this is the such and such kind of tree or such and such kind of animal or bird. And Merlin, you just press record essentially, and as you're listening, it will show you on your screen what bird it is, and then you can record that and listen back to those or compare its bird call to other birds. And to me, those are both things were completely novel to me when I first started using them, basically during the pandemic, right? When I realized how ignorant I was about birds and nature and so much of what I was seeing walking around, and that novelty wasn't just novelty; it was really teaching me. I was learning something, I was enjoying something, I was sharing something in some cases with my family members, and and as a result, and maybe this goes to your point, it's stuck, right? These are things I still use,
Hmm.
not all the time, not every
Hmm.
day, because I'm in a urban jungle in Times Square next to you, right?
Right.
Next door to you. Here at CUNY, we're next door to the New York Times. Um, and so I'm not using them all the time, but I'm using them regularly enough that they feel like they're integrated into my life. And so those are examples to me of, and so many other apps, right? Granola is another one, new to me
Mm.
relatively in the last couple of years. For those who don't know, Granola allows you to essentially, transcribe meetings, summarize meetings that you're in and phone calls and Zooms. And for anyone who has occasional memory lapses and can't remember what you talked about or what you concluded in a meeting periodically, if you're in a lot of those, it's been hugely useful. Like when I think back to the time of meetings before these kinds of tools, I would not wanna go back to that. So that novelty those are some examples of novelty to me where I wanna say yes to the new, in those cases and in many others. I'm curious what you would say yes to in terms of the new.
Right. Well, I was going to mention Merlin. It was on my list because I had a very similar experience, and it is one of those new things that you can bring in and combine it with a sort of a social experience. I would take my kids out to Prospect Park, get out of the urban jungle for a little bit, and use this app to listen to the birds and learn about birds, and it really sort of forces you uh, to be in nature and train your attention on the nature around you. Um, as I mentioned at the beginning of this, I'm a big fan of new tools that help um, with productivity. In my job, we use a lot of automation between um, Google Sheets and Google Docs, and the sort of the new features that Google releases in the Google Workspace have been phenomenal, and have been are an example of something that is actually really serving a purpose and really serving saving some time, and those types of new things. I think that you can sort of integrate into your work in a way that don't require a lot of setup, but can actually, at the end of the day, help you. Are the kinds of new things that I really appreciate, and that sort of work in the background, and don't require a steep learning curve, or any kind of maintenance.
Mhm, mhm. I'm curious about the cover. When new books come out these
Yeah.
days, cover is often such a crucial part of determining whether you're going to get people's attention. Speaking of what's new, right?
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
people are going to look at the bookstore if they're passing by and say, "Hey, that's interesting." What I think it's a phenomenal cover because it's so simple and yet says a lot and grabs
Right.
attention while also making a substantive point that's meaningful and a little bit surprising. What was the thinking behind it? What were other, options you considered if you're open to sharing?
Well, first off, I have to give kudos and credit to the design team at Balance, my publisher. Yeah, the idea behind this cover is that it should stop you in your tracks a little bit. And because yes, it is simple, but it is counter to what we're used to seeing today. So the first thing is the title, Saying No to New. Like I said earlier, that's not what we're supposed to be thinking, right? New is supposed to be better, and we're supposed to say yes to new. That's not only is that sort of our evolutionary instinct, but that's the way that marketers and advertisers and tech companies want us to think. Is they want to sort of tap into that hedonic treadmill that you mentioned earlier, Jeremy, so that after the excitement of the thing that we have now wears off, after I get sort of, you know, I toss this mug warmer thingy into a closet, uh, I'm now ready for the next new thing. And so businesses want me to be thinking new is going to equal better. All right. So that's the first thing, is it stops you in your tracks because it's really different and counter to what we've been trained to believe. Um, and then the phone was is obviously a very intentional choice, because so many of us, when we think about phones, this is the phone, right? And um, uh, I see I got a little bubble came up. Um, the sort of rotary phone as a symbol of something that is so opposite of the way that we use phones or think about phones today, which are seamless. We bring them with us everywhere we go. They're pinging us and dinging us at all times of the day. We're looking at them. Whereas this old thing, which by the way, if is I had to explain to my kids how one of these things worked. The fact that you have to put your finger on it and turn it, it requires effort and thinking, is so opposite of the way that so much of what today works, how things work today. and of course, opposite of the phones that we use. And so they cover as sort of a trick to get us to say, "Wait a minute, this isn't right," right? As a way into a conversation, not that all new things are bad, or we should say no to all new things, but yes, this is a thought that we can have. We can say no to new, and guess what? Sometimes and oftentimes new isn't better. Sometimes it is. But once you start to have that conversation, then you're in it. And then you're that's the purpose of the book is to actually bring some of that thinking and bring some of that sort of intentional decision making back in. Um, because we've gotten to this point. I write about in the book a concept I'm calling the new thing gap, which is, just a few decades ago, the time and distance between seeing a new thing and acquiring a new thing
Mhm.
was maybe days and miles, right? So you see an ad for a new pair of sneakers on TV. Uh, uh, it's going to require some real work and time to think, and then distance to go get the sneakers, right? So that's the new thing gap, right? And in the '90s, let's say it was like this. Well, now that new thing gap has gone down to basically nothing, and so um, we can see a new thing and then acquire it instantaneously. And so the idea behind the book and the cover is really meant to help you sort of feel this is you're taking that new thing gap and you're bringing some of your control back into it, not removing all of the conveniences that we've come to live with, but bringing some of that thinking and distance back into those decision making processes. Um, to your earlier question about like alternatives, um, we looked a lot alternative cover ideas. We looked a lot at technology. Should we go with something that actually looks new, or should we
Mhm.
go with something that looks old? Do we want the book cover to look shiny and new and to have sort of the bells and whistles that you tend to see on a new product, or do we want to go in the opposite direction? So those were sort of the two ideas we were playing
Interesting.
with,
Interesting.
like sales stickers on it maybe, or new, stickers that say new or sort of sparkle, or
Right.
in this direction. We ended up ultimately going in the, hey, this is different from what we tend to see out in the marketplace.
Right. The simplicity becomes a differentiator and the kind of traditional becomes a differentiator comparing it from the no. But
Exactly.
it's
Yeah.
very interesting. Yeah, with A/B testing, in newsletters, you can see, which appeals to people. And I wonder what that A/B test would look like for the flashy new cover with lots of new gadgets that you're kind of
Yeah. Yeah. We should
versus.
A/B test it. That would be fun. And this is in the book. I have a chapter all about sort of bringing others along. It's actually the last chapter of the book, which is to say that we our own decisions that we make every day sort of have invisible influence over the people around us.
Mm,
Right. So if your friends are constantly buying things on Amazon and constantly looking at new content on their phone and often, sort of cycling through just redecorations of their living room and just all in on new, anything and everything that's new. Um, you're gonna see that and there's a psychological sort of effect that it has on you to say, well, if they're doing that, then I should do that. Or, generally people see other people around them and think that whatever they're doing must be the right thing to do. It it can go in the opposite direction as well. So once you start to pull back and be more intentional, um, it does run counter to what you see on social media and out there in the marketplace. And you see a lot of this with de-influencers um, who will go on social media actually to tell you like, hold up, like you actually don't need to like fill your closet with new clothes.
uh-huh. Yeah, I wanted to add one thing to what you said earlier about the new, in the old days, you'd see a new sneaker ad you mentioned, and you'd be able to buy it, but you have to wait some time, and you have to go some distance to get it. The third thing I think that was different, depending on how far back we go, is the idea of credit, right? So you used
Hmm.
to have to outlay that money,
Hmm.
and you'd
Right.
have the pain or the decision of, okay,
Right.
yes, I'm going to spend this number of dollars of my limited supply that's in my wallet or in my bank account at the moment on this new thing, and there's a little friction there versus the credit era. right? Where you
That's
essentially
right.
feel no sense that I'm spending anything, right? Especially something like Amazon, it's free shipping. It's you
Hmm.
have to
Hmm.
pay some at some point in the future, and that also changes the equation as well.
That's right. That's right. Even the negotiation you may have with yourself or with a family member about the cost of something has been scrubbed from the new thing gap. So I write about buy now, pay later,
Mm,
which is now integrated into, every platform you can imagine, online, in person, and just with a few taps. You don't even have to worry even if you don't have the money for it, you can get the new thing. So yeah, it's removing those frictions, those sort of um, that effort, as well as the time and distance between seeing the new thing and acquiring it, and the new thing gap is practically closed, and um, and that's only going to get even. It's not closed entirely, right? You still have to pull up Amazon, to say, okay, oh, that's nice,
or
right?
your agent starts doing it for you,
Well,
right?
see, that's what I'm getting to, Jeremy, is that agentic shopping is currently in the works and being tested where you don't even have to make those decisions. An AI agent will buy all the stuff that you need.
That's yeah, that's powerful and scary as well. Our last few minutes here, I know a lot of other folks might be curious about the book process itself. So a lot of us have thought at one point or another writing a book, maybe have done it, maybe haven't. What are two or three lessons specifically from your experience? I think this is your first book.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, what are two or three lessons, things that surprised you, things that might be counterintuitive that you can reflect on now that you've finished?
Sure, sure. And I'm still learning, by the way, and I've got a lot to learn and have had the benefit of many other authors who have given me advice. And so a couple of thoughts. One is the thing that's been the biggest adjustment for me in writing a book is just the time scale of it all. So I've been working on this book for 3 years. Um, and I think this is somewhat unique to my book, but I think applies elsewhere as well, which is that when you have an idea but it's not going to be published for 3.5 years, it sort of changes the way you have to write or that you write. Um, so I'm writing a book about I've written a book about new things, right? So what is going to be a new thing in September on September 15th, 2026, when my book comes out? I'm thinking about this on September 15th, 2024, and the world changes so quickly that I had to really think hard about how I'm describing something. I write about AI in the book. AI, next week is is going to be different than what it is today. But I think that that isn't unique to my book because I think just the time scale of any creative project like this is is so different than for me personally, but I'm sure a lot of um, folks out there that writing a newsletter, writing a post, writing an article, generally these things take a few days or a few weeks. So thinking about a project that's going to be, over 3 years, that was a big adjustment for me and how to sort of navigate that creative process, knowing that it's going to be a long process with a lot of ups and downs. Um, and then the other thing that I'm still learning, but is was a big sort of change for me, is that to be a book author in 2026 means you also have to sort of join the gig economy and basically like you are in charge of, you know, speaking of new things, like there is so much competition for attention. The marketplace is packed, not just with books, but all kinds of entertainment. So you're going to have a physical thing, a digital thing, an audiobook. How do you break through that noise?
Mhm.
And one of the most useful things that a couple people told me this actually is, that thing where you hear about a book or a TV show and then you hear about it again the next week. Maybe you hear about it from, you go to the New York Times and you see an article about it. And then you're listening to a podcast and they're talking about it. And then a friend says, "Hey, I heard so about the thing." And then suddenly it's everywhere. And then the next thing you know, you're watching the Netflix show or you're buying the book. That type of repetition is really important and is actually a theme in my book, which is that something that's truly novel, we are attracted to, but we also need some familiarity to get comfortable with it. And so when you see an idea like a new book or a new TV show or a new movie, a few different times, that repetition creates familiarity and suddenly you start to feel like, oh, okay, I feel like I know this a little bit, but it's also new and it starts to balance out the equation a little bit. So that was a really interesting thing in terms of marketing that
Mhm.
if you're interested in writing a book, you really have to think about like that experience of who is your audience and what are the ways you're going to sort of get in front of them in a lot of different aspects of their life in a world where people are just bombarded with information, and we're living in the attention economy where it's sort of the wild, wild west.
That's very, very interesting. That repetition idea reminds me of something in business school that professors used to talk about, which is this idea that people have to hear a message 7 times
Right? Yeah.
before it cuts
Yeah.
through. Or typically, they're talking about advertising, but I'm imagining it's true with a new book like yours. So, with that in mind, hopefully, people will hear more and more about your book between now and September. It's called "Saying No to New." Eric Apis of the New York Times. Thanks so much for the conversation. I really appreciate it. It was really a pleasure thinking about this in new ways. And as someone who loves new stuff, I'm definitely eager to continue thinking about this ways in which to move beyond the new and to explore the old as we've been talking about today. Any final thoughts you want to share? Anything you want to add before we wrap?
Well, I hope you take a look at the book. It's available for pre-order now. It comes out September 15th. Available in all the normal places where you can buy books. I am also on Substack, as you know, and I'll be giving sort of updates along the way.
And the name of your Substack.
It's Eric Athis is my name. Eric Athis is my Substack. And um, you can look there for behind the scenes little tidbits I'm starting to drip out, but also pre-order bonuses and some fun stuff planned, including uh, uh, tying it back into Wonder Tools and new things. A decision making tool that you'll be able to pull up on your phone and say, okay, I'm thinking of buying this, this new AI recorder, and it will actually take you through the saying no to new methods to help you along the way. So that will be one of the sort of pre-sale bonuses that I'll be offering. So I encourage you to subscribe and I'll be keep you updated there.
Nice. Thanks so much, Eric, and thanks everyone for joining us this morning.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. Thanks, everyone.
Bye bye.